Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I'm sometimes reminded about, what I do and what it means, and I have a sort of confession. Last week, I saw a patient, and I looked at information, and I saw she had 5 migraine days a month, and really hadn't seen a specialist before, and it's like, I'm a super specialist, what's this person doing here? I'm sorry. and I started to talk to her, and she worked as a substitute teacher, and her school invited her to be a 4th grade teacher, and she loves her kids, and she's obviously wonderful at it, and would be a real asset to any classroom, I think. And she has those 5 days she's in bed, and she hasn't been able to control it, and she and her principal decided that that was too much to to actually have a career, even though she has 25 completely headache-free days. When she's down, she is uncontrollable, and I'm, so this, just one attack can wreck you. Let's proceed here. I think this is a little bit out of date, but it gives you a sense of what that I do, consult with industry in various ways. So what is a migraine? And the old, the ancient name for migraine is sick headache. Think back to that patient I was telling you about, who's lost her chance, because she's sick. She's really sick for 5 days. So this is, something you can just 3 questions and you're done, and 2 out of 3, and you've most likely have migraine headache. Migraine disease or migraine attacks. In the past 3 months, have you felt nauseated or sick to your stomach? Does light bother you more when you have a headache than when you don't? And are your headaches limiting your ability to work, study, or do what you need to do at least one day? And 2 out of 3, and it's a pretty good screener for migraine. It's very simple, and it should be used everywhere. In the doctor's office is what it was designed to do, but people just don't know, and they think it's hard. Over here are 2 somewhat more sophisticated definitions of migraine, but I'd like to say that migraine, that this does not even begin to explain, capture, truly what migraine is. But migraine without aura, which the majority of people have, is attacks that last between 4 to 72 hours if they're not treated. The pain may have some of these characteristics: one-sided, throbbing, moderate to severe, and worse with movement, like walking upstairs or bending over. Either nausea or light and sound similarity, and you get more than a couple of attacks, and then that's enough for migraine. I suspect many of you have every one of those symptoms, and a lot more that isn't captured in this definition. And then there's migraine with aura, and the aura is as symptom or several symptoms that precede usually or come at the very beginning of a migraine headache attack. And the most characteristic ones are these visual phenomenon, which are shown here, plus an artist, and there's a bright part that's often in lines, and then the lines kind of can have like this particular, you know, fortification is the name, going back to old forts, and then this shimmers, and then there's a gray or dark, or even just like an inability to see, and it tends to start as a small thing, and then it expands outwards, it gets bigger, and then it kind of dissolves, and the whole thing takes about 20 minutes, and most of the time you have this, and an attack of migraine headache occurs sometimes on the side of the brain that produced this migraine aura. And sometimes it's all over, but if it's going to be on one side, it'll probably be on the other side from where you experienced that migraine aura. And there are lots of other types. You know, you can have numbness, language problems, or weakness, and those are some of the other aura symptoms that people can have. And how often do people get migraine attacks? By definition, and this might change, for now the cutoff is half the month. If you have headache half the month, and some of them or most of them are migraine, or you have episodic migraine. If it's more, you have chronic migraine, and you can see how it cuts out. So if you have, you know, migraine every single day, that's 1%. If you, of all the people who have migraine, you know, you can add up all those numbers between 15 and 31, and that's the number, the percentage of people who have chronic migraine as opposed to episodic migraine. So how do you treat? I think sort of in terms of boxes. You know, we have abortive treatments, which you take during an attack, and preventive treatments, which you do every day, or in some cases every 28 days, to prevent migraine attacks from occurring. And then you want to do things for your general and migraine health with your mind and with your body. And it's a good exercise to go through, you know, what fits in each box, and just say, okay, well, today I really want to concentrate on this one or that, or this, they all need help, or some of them don't, and other boxes we can do some work in. And that's how I like to approach a visit, a follow-up visit. And so what are the general principles? Recognize your triggers, treat your attacks early, bypass the stomach, you know, sometimes, but you know, that's a really big mistake that people make, you know, is they keep taking pills when their stomach has either shut down or is, you know, operating in the wrong direction, and then the pills just don't work. Do things other than through pills, quiet rest, compresses, devices. We'll get into to these things. Use abortive medications or acute medications, and stay out of medication overuse, which is not a nice word, but stay out of rebound headache. Stratify the care, have a backup plan, and sometimes a backup to the backup. You know, you may need to have a layered plan, and consider, you know, what's going on with you, with your mood, with your sleep, with other things, and you know, choose medicines appropriately. Don't choose a medicine that's bad for your heart if you have heart disease, that kind of stuff. I do want to say a word about stigma, just because I can't help myself, because I think that's the most important thing to know about migraine, is that it is a heavily stigmatized disease, and it is the most stigmatized of the neurologic diseases, more stigmatized than Alzheimer's or epilepsy or any other neurologic disease. There are three kinds of stigma, or a nice way to think about it. There's the stuff you get from interpersonal interactions, so microaggressions of people who say, I have migraine, it's not that bad, I'm not disabled, what's wrong with you, that kind of stuff. The structural, the laws and the policies that, that make it just harder to get, the world to lift a finger for the person with migraine, in school, at work, if they require Social Security, disability, in all of these places, the rules are kind of stacked against the persons with invisible diseases, and particularly persons with migraine. And then there's self-stigma, which is the most awful of the stigmas, where after, getting these comments over a lifetime and, finding the rules stacked against you over a lifetime, you actually start to believe it yourself. And you have negative self-talk, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, it probably worsens the pain, concealment, presenteeism, showing up at work when if you stayed home, you could get over the darn thing in a couple of hours, and you go to work and, you escalate the migraine and it lasts for 2 days. So all of these things. And very importantly, unwillingness to seek care, to ask for help because, it's so painful to get the stigmatizing messages. All right, so there are acute medications, as I've alluded to. There are the non-specific ones, like the non-steroidals, like Motrin, combination analgesics, that basically means Excedrin. Nausea medicines, most nausea medicines, but not ondansetron, actually treat migraine headache, migraine attacks. So you may see many of my patients who have absolutely no nausea take medicines like prochlorperazine or metoclopramide to treat their migraine attacks. Corticosteroids, those are things like prednisone and Decadron and opioids, which we are generally not recommended because they're not that good and they can cause medication overuse and in rare occasions addiction. Then there's the specific ones like ergotamine and DHE, triptans, the Gepants, and the ditans. So those are the specific classes of acute migraine medications. As I mentioned, the concept is have a backup and a rescue, and sometimes a rescue plan. A lucky person may take their initial treatment and be fixed 98% of the time, and they really don't need much of a backup plan. But many, many people should have a second or a third choice if the first one is not effective. And there is no law that you just have to take one, and it's probably underused to create a combination. And I wanted to show some of the options. If something's in a column, you probably don't want to take two of those. Just stick to one. It's not really safe to take aspirin and Motrin. Bad idea. But one of those, the one that works best, might work well mixed with sumatriptan or ubrogepant. And also think, we should be combining medications with complementary approaches, like meditation, mind-body practices, self-regulation, devices, essential oils, ginger, caffeine, green light, and lenses. All of those things work complementary to medications. Now, people who are going to, some people have migraine at one frequency and then they get worse and it comes on more and more often. And so if you look at what predicts whether next year you're going to have daily headache, which means headache more than 15 days per month, if you have 14 days this year, there's a very high likelihood you'll have more than 15 next year. And if you have 1 per month, there's a very low chance you'll have 15. And the number that we think where the brain changes start to happen is at 4 per month or 1 a week. So when you think about being on a preventive medicine, you want something that will pull you back to keep you from evolving into chronic migraine with the really high frequency and the high disability. And so we start to think about preventives at 4 attacks per month. Somewhere between 4 and 8 is where most people and their doctors are ready to really contemplate preventive medicine. And you do want to avoid rebound headache. Butalbital, that's furosemide and Estradiol, is probably the worst for women, and you want to stay under 4 per month. Opioids are probably the worst for men. You want to stay under 4 days per month. Triptans can cause it, like sumatriptan. You want to stay under 8 days a month. Over-the-counter medicines, say Advil, you want to stay under 15 days a month. And we don't think the GPANTs, that's Nurtec, Ubrelvy, and Zavegepant, are probably not going to cause rebound headache. It's very unlikely that they can cause rebound headache, and so we really think that's a great advantage of that class. And then you want to create a lifestyle to help to prevent migraine. This is just a real good way to think about this. Think about core health like hydration, nutrition, and sleep. Movement, especially as migraine gets more severe. I see so many people because moving and exercising is in the moment so difficult for somebody having migraine. And yet, if you don't move, your muscles shrink up, you get a whole host of additional pain, and that contributes to this downward spiral. Think about what you can do. Think about what you can do when you have a migraine attack, and have a plan to get some movement and slow stretching, spinal twist, something that you can do that will help you and you can do realistically. If you have chronic migraine, running a marathon is not something you should put on your exercise plan. Work for connectedness, really important for brain health and a real issue for people who have chronic migraine. And think of that, as something you want to assess in yourself, and then do the exercises to try to engage with people. Think about Miles for Migraine communities and support groups as a way to get connectedness and actually turn having migraine disease into a positive, where you do find people like you and connect with them, and finding opportunities for growth. And we all need to grow for our whole lives. So consider migraine prevention when there's a lot of disability, when the frequency is more than once a week, when acute medicines are ineffective, when the patient, you have a real preference to have as few attacks and don't even want to have 1 a week, and when they're sort of really bad symptoms of the migraine that are really scary or disabling, or such as stroke-like attacks. Here are the preventives that are available. You know, if I gave this talk, 20 years ago, which I did, this was not this good. This is so awesome to practice now. There are the medicines that work through CGRP. I think you know most of those, or you may. Wonderful new addition to our options here. The anti-seizure medicines, the antidepressants, the blood pressure medicines, and then there are a lot of other things like botulinum toxin and some older medicines whose mechanisms don't fit into those four categories. And then there are the naturals. There's the Petadolex, the branded Butterbur, vitamin B2, magnesium, coenzyme Q, melatonin, and medical marijuana that might be valuable for people for prevention of migraine. And then don't forget devices. Devices, the electrical ones, seem to be both abortive and preventive strategies. We generally talk about these devices. I think they're the FDA-approved ones. There is the supraorbital stimulator, that's a cephaly. That one does not need a prescription. The rest of them, for the time being, do need a prescription. There's the vagus nerve stimulator, that's gamma core. There's the frontal, supraorbital, and occipital, so it stimulates in both places, and that's the Relivion device, and then the one that's on the arm, completely different than the other devices, is the Nerivio, and then green light, which you have seen today, which can, for many people, drop the intensity of the headache pain by about 2 points, more than just being in pure dark. So it's actually beneficial for many people who are having migraine attacks with light sensitivity. How long to stay on a preventive? I think it does depend on which preventive, but I do get a sense that too many patients want to give up in 6 weeks because they really want to try something else because they're not better yet. And the purpose of this slide is to show that for the newest preventives, if you're on them for 3 months, you've got a good chance of having an excellent response. But if you stay on that for 12 weeks, if you stay on for another 12 weeks, there's a substantial chance that it'll get better or you'll get a good result. That's the black portion. So, if you're trying, Aimovig or Ajovy or Vyepti, you maybe should stay on it for just long enough to let it work. And then there's some new data looking at sort of types of migraine patients, and I thought that was interesting and just an idea to share with you. And we all have a little bit of each in us. There are people whose predominant sort of bias is they're information seekers. They ask a lot of questions and they want to know things and about their disease and everything. There's the empowered and knowledgeable patient who's interested in self-management and accepts the management of a chronic disease as the way to approach migraine. They're skeptics and limiters, treatment phobic patients or injection phobic or suppository phobic or things like that, and it sort of undermines treatment a little bit. Everybody has preferences. But the skepticism can be damaging, although obviously protective too. And then the successfully treated patients who acknowledge the benefits and continue to manage and just take care of stuff and are fine. And as somebody is in treatment, they probably manifest each of these sort of treatment personalities at various times along their journey, and that's appropriate too. Don't get stuck in one way. You might lose opportunities that another perspective will have for you. And that is probably more than my allotted time, so I apologize if that's the case. I think so. I am.
Why don't you take some questions now?
Okay. Any questions? Yes?
So when you talk about preventive medicines, are you talking about preventing getting a migraine at all, or when you get a migraine, it's less severe?
Preventing at all.
At all.
Right.
And how do you determine who should be put on that kind of medicine?
Well, between 4 and 8 attacks a month, and
what if you have like 4 1 month and then maybe go 2 months without it?
well, your brain kind of averages it out, and you probably, with that story, I'd probably focus on abortive, on acute treatments, and less on preventives, unless like those attacks are absolutely devastating or taking you to the ER, or, whatever, and you can't control, 4 attacks every 3 months. Yeah, that person probably is not going to be on a preventive plan. And very important, of course, is the impact of the headache. Like my patient, who had, 5 headache days per month, but it cost her her dream job. That was, that person needs a preventive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think you could share those slides with us?
I would ask Shirley that, there's one slide that I kind of stole, and I don't want, they let me use it, but I don't know if they would let everybody use it. But yeah, we could remove that slide and then the rest of them. It's the one which shows like the percentage of people who have like 28 to 31 days of migraine, and the percentage of people. That one is not mine, but the rest are. You could have mine. A question? Over the far table from me.
Yeah. How long would you say is too long to be on the same preventative medication?
I mean, I have patients who, they're on it for decades. Because it's working, it's helping, and when we try to wean it, they prove that they need it and they stay on it. So it depends. The general idea is if you do really well, let's say, you're put on a preventive and you're 90% better. At about 6 months of excellent control, we'll talk about weaning off. And we'll back down and see if you still need it. If you look, somebody might have a migraine in their life. It might start as a teenager. It'll come and go at various points, but they'll have manifestations of their migraine disease until they're in their 60s, let's say, and so the treatment that was right for them when they were 15, might be too much when they're 30 and way too little when they're 50. So one has to be prepared to change. And when you don't need it, we definitely want you off your preventive. If you no longer need it, why take a risk of a side effect?
Yeah, because I've been on the same medication since 2007, and it's gradually dropping.
Yeah. Right. So,
Tell us about some of your research about staying on switching preventative quickly.
Yeah. I mean, well, if you've been on the preventive for a couple of decades here, That's not switching too quickly. But, you know, on the other hand, what people have noticed is that, you know, as there are more options, you know, patients like want to get better fast, and if it's not immediate, then they want to switch, you know, and that's scientifically wrong, I think. And, you know, the answer is give it 3 to 6 months, or, excuse me, 12 to 24 weeks for many preventives. Over here?
On your slide, you talked about people that have chronic migraine. So let's use 16 as a round number, 16 a month. And yet, if you have 16 severe attacks during the month, but you only, in order to avoid rebounds, you could only take your abortive 8 times a month. What do you do the other 8, the 8 attacks a month?
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, that I get that question every single day because it is the world we live in, you know, and it's, the good news is if they work for you, the new treatments, the G-PANTs, we don't think they cause rebound headache. So the limitation is no longer those numbers I gave you, you know, 4 per month or 12 per month or 8 per month or, you know, the numbers like that. But the limitation is what your, you know, darn insurance company allows you to get in terms of number of treatments.
The G-PANTs don't work though, then you're really stuck.
Then you're back in that paradox of, you know, how do you avoid overtreatment? And you know, you really have to concentrate on, you know, preventives, obviously. You know, your preventives aren't working very well if you're still getting 16 attacks per month, and those need to be fixed, and you may have to have some bridges, you know, which is like 3 or 6 or 9 days to try to break a cycle and not take overuse or take, you know, abortives that can cause rebound in that period of time, you know, and sometimes, you know, people are in sort of a low-grade rebound, but it gives them a little bit of control in their life, and it's, you know, and we're sort of trying to play, you know, find the best solution within a very difficult biology for people with chronic migraine. So there's no great answer, but you work with your doctor to find the best solution for you. I think this one was and then I'll go to you, and I'm sort of going through tables.
Can you speak about your thoughts on Botox and longer-term use of that, and if there's any negative effects with using that for years?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm having really good results in terms of migraine control in people who've been on it for years. I think it's particularly good, you know, with chronic use, and there's no science to this, but I believe that, you know, people who are 60% better from Botox at year 5 might be 65% better at year 6 and 70% better at year 7, and so forth. So I think it's incredibly safe. So it cannot affect your mood, your thinking, your heart, your lungs, your kidneys. I mean, it's a wonderful. There are sort of cosmetic issues, you know, particularly in older people or people with heavy skin, as you know, we really are trying hard to, you know, optimize long-term cosmetic effects, and then sometimes there's a little bit of weakening of the muscles in the neck, and the dose that was right for of Botox was right for the patient's neck. When you started the attack, you got to drop back the dose because, you know, and to have them do exercises to keep their neck stronger. So.
With the Botox, it's a little bit different, but still related to the migraine. Do you feel that's effective for potential use for the TMJ that's adding to the migraine and putting that in the jaw?
We do, a fair number. We'll put a little bit in for our grinders and clenchers. Yeah, for sure. Okay, because
We're going to take more questions at lunch because we're going to be eating in here. It's very informal, and Dr. Young has agreed to stay until after lunch. So I just want to stay on schedule because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't know by who, but, okay. Thank you, Dr. Young. And I know this is probably something that everybody wants to learn about the treatment options, and so this usually takes a lot of time, so we will come back to it, don't worry. But I do want to introduce our next speaker, because this is also very important, is how to, now I got to figure out how to do this. Bob, I need you up here. Okay. How to work with pain. And so I'm going to introduce to you now Dr. Caryn Seebach, who is a licensed health psychologist with a specialization in holistic management of chronic disease. She has a master's in clinical counseling and health psychology from PCOM, where she was a recipient of the Dean's Award for Academics Excellence. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology from Loyola University in Maryland. She has a deep interest in root cause medicine and its applications for improving psychological health. To this end, she has received additional certifications in integrative nutrition, health coaching, behavioral sleep medicine, and she is a board certified in general biofeedback. She has worked in various clinical care settings, including community health clinics, the U.S. Veterans Affairs Department, and Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. In early 2020, she transitioned her expertise to a broader digital health market to provide integrative health and wellness solutions for those living with headache and migraine. She now owns and operates CL5 Consulting, providing consultation to companies seeking to reverse chronic disease through comprehensive digital integrative care. And in her free time, she is baking with her kids, and her daughter's here today. Hi, Dr. Seebach's daughter, though I don't know your name. She also likes to do a carefully curated playlist, which I'd love to know more about. Or I'm going to just welcome you up here because you have a lot going on. You are very talented. I know, I embarrassed her, but anyway, welcome, Dr. Seebach. You can use the advance with the, you took the clicker, I don't know where it is.
Is this it?
Oh, yeah, here you go.
Okay,
Right here.
perfect. Hello, everyone, and good morning, and thank you, Shirley, for that really lovely introduction. I'm sorry you had to read all that. Thank you for having me back here. It's a pleasure to see some familiar faces, like Dr. Young. I'm a big fan of this group, so it's an honor to be here talking with you today. And so, as you heard a little bit about my background, I am a health psychologist, so I've always worked with individuals that have some form of chronic condition on the behavioral side of things, so the non-medication side. At my core, I am a pain psychologist, so I worked for a really long time working with veterans who had diffuse chronic pain, and then the latter part of my career has been almost exclusively working with individuals who have migraine. So just a little context, when I was coming up in the VA, fresh out of grad school, there was a lot of attention on getting veterans off of opioids who had long-standing chronic pain. And so I was tasked with building a pain psychology program, and it was the first ever pain psychology program in the VA. There was no roadmap for this. I was so excited. I was like, this is gonna be amazing. We're gonna, kind of shift the paradigm here. And I quickly started to see a pattern, which was by the time people were being referred to me, the messaging was, this is sort of your last stop. This is the end of the line. And so what was internalized and what the patients would hear is like, we tried everything we can and now it's pretty much in your head. And so you can imagine they were thrilled to come see me after many roads of seeing lots of doctors, lots of time, lots of effort, lots of suffering, now go see the psychologist. And so I learned very quickly that I had to not come in and explain what my patients should do to feel better, but I had to listen. And I had to sit with them in their experiences.
And through that process, I learned a ton about stigma. I learned a lot about suffering. And through the work of suffering, which we can do something about, things like depression and trauma and anxiety, most of the time the pain would get better. And so my patients would come to me and they would say, well, so did that mean it was in my head? And I said then what I say today, which is pain is always in the brain. You are not making it up. You are not faking it. You did not create this pain. But the mind and the body are intimately connected. What we didn't have over a decade ago, we now have, which is proof as to how and why they are connected. And so I think it's really important to start with that context, to reduce stigma, to empower you as a person with migraine to know what to do about it from a behavioral side. And I will tell you, it's filled with a lot of hope and optimism, more than ever before. All right, let's see if I can navigate this. So in honor of Veterans Day, I have a quote here from one of my early on patients who was in a lot of pain. He was suffering quite a bit, and through his journey in our clinic, he got to a place where he was feeling much more hopeful and resilient. And so he said, I am married to my pain. She is my wife. I may not always get along with her, but she is in my life and has made me who I am. We used to fight all the time, but now we have an understanding that she can't control my life or make me miserable. In return, I've learned to really listen to her and to understand what she needs. All right, so I've been doing a lot of talking. I just want to take a couple moments here to do a little experiential exercise. So I'm a big fan of something called self-regulation, which is being able to regulate your nervous system through different activities, through resetting the nervous system. And I'm a big fan of making those really doable. I like to call them minis. So we're going to do a mindful pause, which is not my phrase. It comes from the VIA Institute on Character. And I can share these slides, I think, Shirley, and we can disseminate them so you have all the resources. So if you will, humor me a moment and just take a moment to get comfortable in your chair. And you can decide if you would like to keep your eyes open, avert your gaze, close your eyes. That is completely up to you. And I'd like you to just start to feel into your body by breathing. I'd like you to just start to take slower, deeper breaths. We're going to do this around 6 to 8 times. And just start to notice the body breathing itself like waves of the ocean, coming and going, maybe a little deeper, a little slower. And as you breathe here comfortably, I want you to imagine one of your top strengths. No need to overthink it, whatever comes to mind. This could be resilience, curiosity, presence, determination. Whatever that strength that comes up for you. And now I want you to imagine that you can call on that strength whenever you need it in this next hour, in this next day, to give you what you need to be at your best. And we're going to take one more deep breath. Exhale. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the room. And we can check in at the end if we have time and just see what people noticed. But I want you to keep that strength in mind as we talk. Okay, So I did a little bit of an experiment for this talk. As I mentioned, a long time ago when I was in the VA, I was really, really interested in understanding what are some of these protective factors that protect against pain. There was a ton of information on how things like depression and anxiety affect pain, but there was nothing on the positive side, the positive emotions. And so I struggled because there wasn't a lot of research to pull from. And so I did just a little experiment where I Googled and I looked at positive emotions and pain. And now there are hundreds of thousands of studies on this in just 10 years. So it has been a dramatic shift away from what we used to know as a dualistic approach to care, or to pain, which was started with Descartes in the 16th century. And the idea then was like the mind and the body are very separate. And the only way you can experience pain is to experience a stimulus or an injury, and then that spreads to the rest of the body. But there's no crossover between emotions and pain. Now we know that's simply not to be true. And as I mentioned earlier, we have proof. We now know that emotions have spots in the brain that control them and release neurochemicals that can protect against pain or can worsen pain. I should also mention, when I say pain as it relates to migraine, it's an oversimplification, meaning that it's not just pain and migraine. It's a complex neurological condition that has a cluster of symptoms to include pain and non-pain, like aura and allodynia. So forgive my oversimplification, but you'll hear that word a lot. Okay, so just a little primer. When I started off in this field, there was a revolutionary idea called the biopsychosocial model, which was one of the first times that we acknowledged that the way we feel and our environment may have anything to do with our health. It wasn't all that long ago. It was in the early 2000s. And quick on the heels of that, in the mid-2000s came an evidence-based treatment called cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic pain, which was revolutionary because there was a standardized treatment that we could use that worked for some people, not all people, and it quickly became the only game in town. So it was studied a lot, used a lot, but not everyone was getting better. So quickly after that, something called ACT for chronic pain came through, acceptance and commitment therapy, which for the first time brought in things like values and purpose and mindfulness and meditation. And so you can see that this evolution kind of, once it took off, it really took off to include now mindfulness-based interventions. I know you're gonna hear a little bit about that today. And my personal favorite came around in the mid-2010s, which was the neuroscience of pain. Why is it that we experience pain? How can it be influenced? And what does the brain do? And then how can we manage or control that? And I will say one of the few silver linings of COVID is that now we are taking that education and we are trying to democratize it, I think, as a society, through telehealth, through digital health interventions. That's something I'm very passionate about, is to be able to take these learnings and allow the masses to access them through digital means. And so let's circle back to this idea of it's in your head, which I will say is still conveyed to this day, even from well-intentioned providers like myself. We can subtly convey that this is somehow something you are creating, or it's simply psychological. And so I get asked a lot of the times, well, is it the chicken or the egg? Like, am I in pain because I'm suffering, or am I suffering because I'm in pain? And the reality is that's a gross oversimplification. It's the chicken and the egg. You know, in acute pain, we might be able to tease that out, but in chronic pain, the chicken and the egg now become one, and we have to treat it as such. And so in order to take an anti-stigma approach to managing migraine, I think it's really important to understand something called the neuromatrix. And so the neuromatrix is a term that was coined by a neuroscientist by the name of Melzack. And basically it says that the brain is a network of areas that work together, and they generate the perception of pain. But that perception of pain can be influenced by things like emotions, or stress, or anxiety, or traffic. And so these inputs and outputs now start to mix in a vicious cycle that, you know, becomes sort of this complex network of interlaying processes. And beyond that, we have a subset of the neural matrix called the pain matrix. And this is very specific to the experience of pain. And Dr. Young, don't look too closely at my brain that I made myself. But we have these various areas in the brain that not only we realize have some say in how pain is expressed, but they also modulate things like emotions or decision making or sensory information, memories, in addition to physical sensations. And it's no coincidence that these areas of the brain are shared. There's a there, which we now know through things like fMRIs, where we can see this happening in real time. Okay, so a word on something called neuroplasticity. Who in this room has heard that word, neuroplasticity? Oh, yes, okay, my people. So neuroplasticity is one of the most exciting things, I think, to come out of modern medicine, for me at least, because for so long we felt the brain was static. Like, you get what you get, and too bad, basically. And we now know that that is not at all the case. Now, that can work in our favor, such as unlearning pain. It's also the same process that happens to learn pain. And when I say learn, it's the brain kind of figuring out, how do I have pain, how do I not have pain? So it runs on 3 principles. One is when you do an activity, when you learn something, when you experience something, just like riding a bike or any, learning to exercise, if you don't keep practicing that and learning it again and again, you're gonna lose that neural network. And so it literally is, that's why you probably hear a lot with mindfulness and meditation, it's a lot about consistency, because it's like building a bicep. You have to do it again and again and again to strengthen it. The second premise of neuroplasticity is what fires together, wires together. So that means that every time you have a new experience, these synaptic connections form, and they tend to cluster together, and then they tend to strengthen each other. And again, that's very exciting because we can harness that power. And then the last piece of this is when we make them, we break them. So that means it's sort of like a crowding out phenomenon. So in the case of pain, what happens is the brain lays down these neural networks that's like pain or allodynia or aura, and it starts to crowd out some of these other neural networks that probably could be helpers that could quiet that response down. The inverse is also true. So I want you to keep these 3 principles in mind as we talk, because they're pretty important for how to manage pain behaviorally. Okay, we're almost at the end of this cerebral part of this, so thanks for hanging in there. I think something that's not often talked about is a concept called central sensitization. Just show of hands, who's heard of that term before? Dr. Young, I hope so. Okay. Okay, actually that's impressive. Most people haven't heard of that. So the idea is that in acute pain, it's a messenger, right? We touch a hot stove, ooh, pull your hand away. Or we break an arm, don't move that arm, put it in a cast. This is danger, danger, danger. What happens with chronic pain is that these signals, in a sense, just get rewired, and the nervous system, particularly the brain, the spinal cord, they just get really hypersensitive. They essentially overlearn pain. And now this neurocircuitry starts to go a little haywire. And so because of neuroplasticity, we now have a sensitivity to pain. This is why stimuli that typically wouldn't cause pain, like an overhead light or a touch, can be exceptionally painful for someone that has migraine. because central sensitization has taken place and now the body has overlearned that pain response and become hypersensitive, like a volume dial that's just stuck on high and can't be turned down. And so what turns down that volume? Well, you just heard Dr. Young explain some of the advances we've had in medications, in treatments like Botox, in infusions, some of the antibody treatments that are very exciting. But when we think about the bucket theory of migraine, show of hands, who's heard of that? Oh, okay. Let me stop and explain that a little bit more. So I'm a big fan of this because I think it really explains the notion of hypersensitivity, but also triggers. Dr. Young told me when I started at the Headache Center, there is no such thing as triggers. And I wanted to get in an argument with him. I was like, of course there's triggers. What do you mean there isn't triggers? I hear about them all the time. And what he was trying to explain to me is that migraine is a threshold disorder. And so every person with migraine has a bucket. And your threshold in your bucket is unique to you. And so all of these different droplets from a faucet, let's say, that's been turned on, just drop into your bucket. And those are going to be your migraine contributors. That can include things like the weather, that can include hormones, that can maybe even include genetics. And then what happens is your bucket just gets full. You cross over your threshold. And that last drop, which maybe was that piece of chocolate or that very stressful event, is what sends you over the edge into an attack. Was it the chocolate that created your migraine? No. It was a drop in a full bucket. And so what I also think we need to express when we talk about the bucket theory is that central sensitization is very much a player in this. We have this threshold and these sensitivities because we are pre-sensitized to pain. And so how do you drain the bucket? And that's why you all are here today, right? And so that's going to be the factors such as the medicines and the things that I teach that you're going to find that work for you to drain the bucket and keep it drained. All right, so what are aggravating factors that can fill the bucket? This could be its own talk for hours. It's, again, very unique to you, but I'm going to tell you just a couple that I see pretty universally. The first one is this idea of change. Anytime you are going for a treatment for migraine, you are being asked to change. You're being asked to try new things, switch up your medications, go see the psychologist. Have you tried yoga? You're constantly having to pivot around change, which is antithetical to how the brain wants to operate. The brain, especially the primitive parts of the brain that are really ingrained, that rat brain that we all have, doesn't like change. It's like, hey, survival happens because I know what's coming, because it's consistent, I know what's happening, and I'm not going to change. And so it is a shock to the nervous system every time you have to change. I also think there's something we don't talk enough about, which is parallel to these stages of change that we all go through. There are stages of grief happening at the same time, ebbing and flowing at various points in managing a chronic painful condition. And so that's things like acceptance, it's also things like avoidance, it's things like depression, and then we test things, right? Like, is this gonna get better? Can I believe in this? Can I have hope about this thing? And we just cycle through this. That takes a lot of energy from the nervous system as well. Another main universal experience I see, and this is for every human on this planet, is something called the negativity bias. So we are hardwired to see the negative. Literally, we have like 500 times the neural networks dedicated to scanning the environment for negative threat compared to positive. And so just off the bat, as humans, we need to work to balance this out, counterbalance this predisposition. It's evolutionary in terms of its adaptation, but in our modern world where we no longer have to run from saber-toothed tigers, Traffic, for example, can have the same effect. Like now it's the worst thing that's happened in my day because the brain is so sensitized to scanning for negative threat. Imagine now, as a human being, you're born into the world this way, and now you have a very chronic, painful condition. I know you all can imagine that. And so what does this mean? So Rick Hansen, who is credited as being one of the godfathers of positive neuroplasticity, said there's a couple features of the negativity bias that we all share. One is that we can be overly reactive when conditions are challenging. I'm sure we can all relate to an example. Mine does happen to be traffic, which is why I keep bringing it up probably. Feeling uneasy and dissatisfied when conditions are fine. So like everything could be copacetic, but there's just this level of unease, like waiting for the shoe to drop. Overlearning from negative experiences, meaning that we can magnify the things that have happened negatively in our life, and the brain just keeps replaying it like a bad movie. And remember that time that, I didn't get the job, or I picked the wrong person to partner with. It just keeps reliving it like a trauma almost. Becoming very quickly sensitized toward reactivity. Again, we're just sort of hardwired to like, it's not gonna go our way. And then a slowness to returning to comfort and ease. You just need that much more energy and resources to get back to a baseline. So now you take that and we add migraine. Again, a condition that doesn't relent, that's every second of every day, where things really do go wrong, right? And so the brain is now learning, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it doesn't go well. And what do we see? We see this in migraine, actually, most chronic painful conditions, there is a heightened negativity bias. And again, this is central sensitization. This is neuroplasticity at work. This is not you just being in a bad mood. So the migraine brain has stronger emotional reactions to negative events, which we now know can be one of the exacerbators of migraine attacks. As pain increases, that attunement to the pain also increases. So your brain is just more focused on it. There's something called pain catastrophizing, which we all catastrophize. Pain catastrophizing is, this is the worst possible thing, it's never gonna get better, and it's always gonna be this way. And I think everyone in this room can probably relate to that experience, which is probably one of the most human experiences we can have. And then, as you might imagine, it affects coping strategies. It can be hard to pick yourself up and try new things and keep at it and have hope. And so the migraine brain is extra affected by negativity bias. So I think this is a good opportunity to switch into something called stigma, because I'm very focused on, when I teach these things, that we do not blame the person with migraine. Again, this is why the neuroscience, I think, is super important. I learned a lot about stigma from Dr. Young. He taught me pretty much everything I know about stigma, and so did my patients. And so we know stigma to be a societally driven judgment. It's a stereotype projected onto certain groups of people for just being different or misunderstood or who are facing challenges. When you add consistency into that, meaning your migraine doesn't get better, time, so this goes on for a while, months to years to decades, and then just a lack of support and isolation, which is unfortunately a byproduct of stigma, it then can be internalized. So it was previously something that was external in the environment, a belief system of society, can now start to go seep into your own system and your own values, just as a natural byproduct of being essentially a victim of stigma. Migraine is one of the most stigmatized conditions that we have. It has a very long history of being judged against, misrepresented. I know this group knows that better than anybody. And so how does this show up? And this, you may relate to some of these in your own way, and you probably have your own unique experiences, but it can absolutely lead to a negative self-perception. That can be things like, I'm just weak, I'm unreliable, if I were stronger, I could move through this. Or I'm burdensome to my family. At some point, they're just gonna get sick of this. I am a burden. Internalized stereotypes. So it's just because I can't cope with my stress. I wanna mention these can be really subtle too. And so it's something that I think, it can be nuanced. A fear of disclosure, which is masking. I think everyone in this room can relate to masking, which is you basically put on a brave face. For my patients that were working, this was so common. They wouldn't tell anyone at work that they have migraine. They power through because of this experience, because of the fear of disclosure. It obviously can affect self-esteem, where you start to question your capabilities and your abilities. Which leads to reduced self-efficacy, which means self-efficacy is your ability to cope with the thing that you have to cope with, that you have the tools to do that job. And then, of course, there's a reduced quality of life. That's probably the biggest byproduct that, at least in my work, I see again and again. There's just a vicious cycle where the person starts to withdraw. They're sort of conditioned to withdraw. I'm just gonna say no to that thing because I don't wanna disappoint anybody. And I'm unreliable, so I'm just not even gonna try to meet this group of people. That is all internalized stigma. Okay, so we're gonna shift the mood here. Let's look at time. How am I doing? I have 5 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna turbo through this. What now protects against this, right? Okay, so now we know there's such a thing as neuroplasticity. There's such a thing as positive neuroplasticity, taking neuroplasticity and using it for good. So we know that we can create these neural pathways and they can protect against the thing we want it to, which in this case is migraine. So what are healing factors? Legitimately, we can see this on brain scans. It's things like hope and gratitude and creativity and purpose. And altruism, acts of kindness. I see Miles for Migraine do that a lot. They're very good at altruism. And so why does that work? Well, all of those happy neurochemical helpers that are in things like Prozac and antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications and many migraine medications, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to release these happy hormones, these happy neurochemicals. And so we can get those endogenously within our own body through very targeted means. It's not a matter of just kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and telling yourself that you're grateful. There are very strategic ways we can self-regulate. Self-regulation at its core is the ability to be self-aware enough of what you are experiencing in your body physically, in your mind cognitively and emotionally, and how you're acting. And this is a real skill set and something that I think anyone with migraine has to work extra hard at, because one of the ways that you learn to cope potentially is to not feel, right? Which is, we can have a lot of empathy for that strategy. It's like, I don't want to feel this way, so I'm just not going to feel. And so you're going to learn a little bit more, I think, today about the most evidence-based ways to self-regulate: mindfulness, meditation, relaxation training. They are different tools for different jobs. I'm going to skip this slide. Here's some of my favorite tools, and again, we'll give you these slides so that you have access to them. But they all are things that either you can do on your own or with a practitioner. When it involves a practitioner, I've tried to give you resources. One of the things that I really like is a strengths-based approach, and so I've put some resources here for you. I'm going to do a spotlight on one of these treatments. I find it fascinating. It's evolving. It's called pain reprocessing therapy. And at its premise, the idea is that pain is not only sensation, but it is fear. It's evolutionary. We have been hardwired to fear pain. And so we cannot address pain in any way, shape, or form without addressing fear and safety needs. These are primal, basic needs. And so there's a lot of education, there's a lot of using somatic experiencing, which is feeling into the body, knowing that you are safe, having some level of control, And then also education around those things, really empowering the person with pain to understand what's happening in their body. There's one research study on this that is ironically done by the people who developed it, so we take it with a grain of salt, but they had some promising results. 90% of their patients improved after a 12-week program, and 66 of those said they were nearly pain-free. This includes both diffuse musculoskeletal pain and migraine. Okay, do we have time for a 2-minute video? Video? Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's see if I can actually play this. I have a feeling this might happen. Huh. Well, it didn't actually embed, it looks like. Here's what we'll do. Because I have this resource on this tools.
We're going to be sending out this after. We're going to put a whole new page.
Perfect. The website for this video and many others is on here, so I'll work with you to make sure you guys get it. There is a wealth of information on this website. It's called This Might Hurt. There's a whole movie that they've done. Some of you might have heard of it. And there's a whole section on migraine alone where there's videos where you can go and experience what pain reprocessing therapy would look like in the moment. All right. This Might Hurt. I think it's thismighthurtmovie.com. But again, it's on this resource page. So I will stop talking now. I want to thank each and every one of you for just taking all your resources to pay attention to me. I want a special shout out to my daughter who came with me today. She's taught me so much about resilience and self-regulation, so I'm very grateful for her. And yeah, should we take, yeah, thank you, thank you.
I mean, we have time.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be in person and teaching. That's a real treat for me. So, as Shirley said, I do currently teach mindfulness at Jefferson, and I also have had migraine since I was about 9 years old, so I can relate to many of you. Many years of chronic migraines. So, and as a nurse, being very skeptical about 30 years ago, someone told me about meditation, and it sounded really woo-woo, you know? It's like, really? Because there was no evidence base back then. And what's exciting now is there is. And some of what I want to tell you about. I'll talk a little bit later about how meditation has affected my life. But I want to, hopefully today, I don't have a lot of slides. One of the things with any kind of meditation practice, whether it's mindfulness or other practices, is you really have to do it. You could be the best exercise physiologist in the world, but if you don't exercise, it doesn't do the body any good. So we'll get a little taste of that today. Nothing too strenuous, but we'll get a little taste of that. And also, I'm hoping to maybe demystify, you know, starting any kind of new habit is hard enough. But if you have misconceptions about that, hopefully if we clear that up, the barriers will be lower. Let's see. So how many have heard of mindfulness? You know, this is so different than it was years ago. It's amazing. How many people have actually done any kind of meditation? Unbelievable. Really, it's just changed so much. And one of the reasons why it's changed is because of the research. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out to the Miles for Migraine website. They've got a wonderful little section on recent studies about migraine and meditation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, and let me see. Yeah, I'll do that. I don't have a slide yet for that. One of the reasons, and when Dr. Seebach was talking about the bucket and the threshold, well, if you I'm going to read off a little bit of stuff that 40 years of research has taught us about mindfulness meditation. Now, there are different kinds of meditations. This specific research has to do with MBSR, mindfulness-based stress management, done around that. And so I have to put my glasses on because I won't remember. Okay, so decreased stress, decreased pain, decreased reactivity, decreased depression, decreased anxiety, increased coping capacity for stressful chronic illnesses. And then on the biological side, increased healing, lower cortisol, which is a stress hormone, improved immune response, and there's even some studies not too long ago, they're not big studies, but it shows that cellular aging is slowed. So it's pretty remarkable that this process of sitting and doing nothing can have these profound effects. And if you think about what Dr. Seebach talked about, this is filling this stuff like stress and depression and anxiety and reactivity, they all increase the level of your bucket and move you closer and closer to your threshold. So if you can do something to reduce how quickly that bucket fills, you'll be in better shape. So I wanted to, let me see, do I just touch or enter? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna start with Jon Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness definition. And he's the guy, back in the 70s, molecular biologist, also had a lot of history with yoga and meditation, put them together, created MBSR, which is what we teach at Jefferson. And the combination of this was developed specifically for patients who fell between the cracks of medicine. So basically, his definition is that it's the awareness that's cultivated by paying attention in a very particular way. And awareness is underlined for a really important reason. Mindfulness meditation is an awareness practice, okay? So on purpose, so you are paying attention on purpose to the present moment. So whatever's happening in the present moment, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, non-judgmentally, which is a real kicker, because I know a lot of us aren't great about being non-judgmental, right? But if I can learn it, anyone can, because it's not easy. We have so many tapes running around in our heads where we criticize and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So basically, this is the definition for mindfulness. The other thing is he talks about it being, there's two wings of mindful awareness. One is attention and the other is compassion. So you really need both of these elements. So you can be really, really focused in attention, but not have a kindness or a compassion towards yourself, and it's not going to really help. You can be very compassionate, but if your attention's all over the place, you're not going to be skillful. So we really need both things. And I'm a very visual learner. So our present moment experience feels very solid, right? The thoughts that go through our head feel like it's all real. But if you really think about it, what's happened in the past is a memory, and what is coming is virtual. It doesn't exist. The only thing that exists for us is the present moment, and that is what we can feel, see, smell, taste, the mood state we're sensing, the thoughts that we're having right now in this moment. So it's present moment awareness of this moment. And so why do we want to be in the present moment? Why is that helpful? Well, there's some pretty big studies that show that you're happier if you're in the present moment, even if what you're experiencing isn't particularly pleasant. You know, if you spend a lot of time in the past, you might tend to have lower mood states. If you spend a lot of time planning and fixing and doing and out in the future, you might tend to be a little bit more anxious. So, you know, where your attention is very helpful to be in the present moment. What percentage would you say we are in the present moment? Just throw out some numbers. Anybody? 30? Zero. You guys are really pessimistic. It's actually 47%. So it's not as bad as you thought, right? And if you have any doubts about that, just think about the last time you drove your car someplace and just had absolutely no clue how you got there. Can anybody relate to that? Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too. It's a little scary, isn't it? When you, yeah. So basically, our attention is not in the present moment. This is not abnormal. This is the human condition. But through training, we can bring attention closer and closer to the present moment more frequently. And it's really very helpful because when you know what's going on and you're aware of what's happening in the moment, you have choice. You don't have choice if you don't know what's going on. The other thing is, this is a little bit of bad news. We basically, they're saying that our current attention span is about, I guess, 8.25 seconds, down from 12 seconds back in 2000. And I have to tell you, a goldfish has the attention span of about 9 seconds, so we're not doing great. Okay? But that too can be trained, and the neuroplasticity that was spoken about earlier is one of the mechanisms through which mindfulness works. And so our brains can be rewired to to be more attentive to what's happening in the present moment. So I want to just, and I don't, like I said, I think this is my last slide. The rest we'll do a couple other things. So I like to just talk basically about some of the misconceptions. Because like I said, it's hard enough to start a new habit, which meditation is. It's a new habit. It's hard enough to start that when you basically have preconceived notions that are not correct. So basically, if you're not relaxed and calm while you're practicing, you're doing it wrong. Well, mindfulness meditation is an awareness practice. And I have a slide on that in a minute that I'll show you. So the result of bringing your attention back and training your awareness can be relaxing and calming, but it's not always. But the beauty is that it doesn't matter whether you feel relaxed and calm after a practice. It doesn't really matter. It still works. That's really good news because it's the training. You have to be able to sit still. Well, there's lots of wonderful meditation practices that you can do moving. There's walking meditation, there's yoga, where the movement of the body is the focus. You have to be able to sit cross-legged while I'd be out of the count right here. The position you take while you're meditating is simply a support for the meditation, so whatever works for you. It's a religious practice, so it's not, because basically we're just tapping into an already existing capacity that our brains have, and we're training it up, okay? We're trying to, they say neurons that fire together wire together, and so we're just trying to increase those pathways. And that you need to be able to clear your mind. How many people have heard that about meditation, that you need to be able to like sit quietly and just clear your mind? Well, I'd be out of it too there, because, you know. But what this practice can do, because our minds are they have a lot of opinions, and they keep talking sometimes, no matter what, you can change the relationship you have with your thoughts, which is a very powerful aspect of mindfulness. And the last one is that you can only, and it's not, you can only practice mindfulness while sitting and doing a formal practice, and that's absolutely not true. You can train your attention through activities of daily living. Brushing your teeth. You know, I'm brushing my teeth and I'm planning my day and I realize I've wandered away from the brushing teeth and I come back to the brushing teeth. And then it wanders again and I come back. Or, you know, doing dishes, talking to a friend. You're talking to, how many people have had a conversation with somebody and all of a sudden the mind is going, well, you notice that, you come back. And it's that coming back. So just pausing right now, whatever position you're sitting in, and noticing where your mind is. So just noticing without judgment, that's the hard part. You know, you might be planning, you might be right here with my voice, you might be thinking of something in the past. So the reason why little check-ins throughout the day are like, where's my mind right now? Are really important is because if you know where the mind is, if you know where the body is, if you're walking around with your shoulders up to your ears, if you don't realize that, you don't have a choice to go, oh, let me soften a little bit. You know, so awareness equals choice. So I don't know how many of you maybe have had that experience where you're trying to sit quietly and the brain is just having a party upstairs, right? I mean, and when we do a practice in a little bit, you might find this is going on, but then that's what you notice. That's what you notice. That's your reality for that moment. I love this sculpture, I really do. So, this is what I was talking about. One of the things, this is the training. It looks so simple, right? Anchor, the mind wanders, you become aware, you kindly return to the anchor, you begin again. How simple could it be, right? But it's really not that simple. It's a little challenging because your mind has a mind of its own. They say, I'm not going to try to quote that, never mind. I'm taking it back. Okay, so here's the deal. It doesn't matter how many times you go around this circle, even in a 4-minute period. You might find that as we're doing our little mini practice, that like after 30 seconds, you're away from whatever anchor. We're going to do a little body scan, whatever anchor we're at. Well, it's okay, because there'll be a part of your brain that goes, oh, you're supposed to be thinking of the foot. You're supposed to be feeling the sensations in the foot. Let me go back there. And you just go back. And then you'll be someplace else maybe. And then you just go back. And here's the thing. The coming back, it's like exercising a bicep. That's what trains the brain. You go away, you come back. And you do it kindly. I love the analogy of herding puppies. You know, like you have a little pen of puppies and, oh, you wouldn't go, get back here, right? Because we do that to ourselves. You're supposed to be meditating. You go, oh, come here, honey. Come on back. Come back to the, and, oh, here's another one. Let me come and bring the puppies back. So if you can, it takes a little practice, but the kindness and the compassion. So what are we anchoring on? We're anchoring on, you can, with meditation, with mindfulness meditation, you can anchor on the breath, body sensations, sound, movement, eating. There's all sorts of things. It doesn't really matter. Brushing your teeth, the sensation of brushing your teeth. So what I'd love to do is, if you guys are up for trying a little body scan and seeing what your experience is. Now, totally optional. The only thing I ask is that the floor is kind of loud, So if you choose not to participate, it's a really brief practice. If you could just quietly stay in your seat, it's not a problem. So this is nothing exotic. So right now, without even looking at your hands, you can probably know that you have hands, right? And you can know it because you can actually feel your hands, just the existence of hands. Maybe there's little sensations there, like tingling or warmth or coolness. You might be able to feel your feet in your shoes. So maybe some fabric against skin. So that's what, and if you get to a body part, then I'm going to sort of just briefly take you up through the body. Each little place will be a little bit of a moving anchor. If your mind wanders away, you come back. If you get to a body part and you don't feel anything, not a big deal. It's just the way it is right now for you. It's not a big deal. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take my little seat. Can everybody hear me without the microphone? Yes. Okay, great. So, one of the things that Dr. Seebach talked about was the deep breaths, and one of the most wonderful ways to start any kind of practice is to help the nervous system out a little bit by just taking some breaths. So we're going to just do 3 deep breaths, if you'd like. Breathing in, So I'm just curious, what's here right now for you? What do you notice? It can be anything because it's an awareness practice.
Calmer.
You feel calmer.
Peacefulness.
Peacefulness. Mellow. Mellow. Anybody feel fidgety or a little bit more anxious or perhaps became more aware of any kind of pain or discomfort that they had? Yeah, because that can happen too, right? Yeah, because when we're quiet, things, sensations in the body or thoughts in the head or mood states, when we slow down, especially at first, they feel more prominent. So, did I ever say relax? I never said relax, did I? So isn't it fascinating that it is possible to feel relaxation just by coming into the present moment that acutely? Yeah. One of the things that helped me so much as a migraine sufferer over the years was I really was never aware of my thought patterns. My migraines would come around 3 o'clock in the morning. I called it my witching hour. And I would wake up with a headache and go, oh my God, I can't believe it. This is gonna happen, that's gonna happen. I'm not gonna be able to do this. This is awful. I can't stand it anymore. What do you think that does to the body, those thought patterns? But I wasn't even aware that that was my story, that's what I would tell myself. So I think what happened for me was, and I remember when they first tried to teach me that you could pay attention to your thoughts, it was like, but I am my thoughts. What do you mean I can pay attention to my thoughts? That like made no sense at all, that it was a separate thing, that you can have thoughts and be aware of them at the same time. So that was really helpful. The other thing that was really helpful is noticing my body, because I would just plow through. How many people can relate to just plowing through no matter what? Yeah, yeah. And what happens is you just scoot right over what's common sense, like, oh, I should rest right now. I should take a 10-minute break, because you're totally out, because I didn't want to be in my body. The first time I heard about a body scan, I did not want to be, my body was my enemy. Really. And so I didn't want to be in it, and I was very resistant, but it turned out to be one of the most valuable practices that I learned is the body scan. It took a while to become friends with it, but I finally did. So the other piece that I just wanted to talk about quickly, because I think we're getting towards the end. Okay. So that's a real nutshell of mindfulness practice. We happen to move through the body. There's practices where you just focus on the breath or use sound. There's lots of wonderful practices. The MBSR program goes through a lot of different aspects of mindfulness that unfortunately I don't have time to get into. But one of the most important parts of this is that other wing of the bird, which is compassion practice. And the research on that, just like a lot of this research on positive psychology and the effects of mindfulness, there's been such wonderful research on compassion practices. The US military is using it for PTSD. People with chronic pain are using it. Healthcare professionals, physicians, nurses, it is directly related to reduction in burnout. So this soft, squishy skill, compassion, you know, that we probably have lots of for other people, but not a lot for ourselves, is another skill that can be learned. And it probably was one of the biggest breakthroughs for me as a migraine sufferer, was to learn self-compassion. And I have a quick and dirty self-compassion practice that I want to share with you. Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer are two wonderful practitioners and researchers. So this is optional, but if you'd like to, go along with me, right now in this moment, you might be experiencing something unpleasant. It might be a physical pain, it might be a mood, it might be thoughts that are really difficult. And if not, I invite you to recall something that's not real pleasant. Please don't pick the worst trauma of your life. That wouldn't be skillful right now, but just something that you're grappling with, or a memory of something unpleasant. Maybe it was a conversation that just feels not wonderful. And if you'd like, you can just close your eyes if that helps support you. And so the first step in this three-part compassion practice is just acknowledging that this is here. That this is here. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to change it. It's just allowing whatever's here to be here, and acknowledging that it's hard. This is hard. This is difficult. So that's just the first step, just pausing, and this is hard. And then the next step is realizing your shared humanity with all the billions of people on this earth. I guarantee you, and actually I would say in this room, there probably is somebody else experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing. So you're not alone. You're not alone. And then the third piece is just offering yourself some words of kindness. And you might even think about, what would I say to a really close friend or a child going through the same thing? And just kindly talking to yourself for a moment. It's okay. You've got this. This is hard, but you're going to get through it. And so just taking a couple breaths. And noticing what's here. If your eyes are closed, opening them up. So 3 parts. Pausing, checking in, what's here? This is hard. This is not easy. And then, I'm not alone. This is being experienced by somebody someplace on this planet. Maybe even wishing that person well. And then the last little piece is saying something nice to yourself. Kindness. And so a lot of times, I know working with people with migraine, a lot of times there's this fear that if you let your guard down, you're not going to be able to cope. There's that, I have to tough this through. But there's a real power in offering yourself self-compassion. And it is a skill set that can be learned, because I was the farthest away from knowing that skill set when I first started all of this. So that is my presentation. It was very brief. There will be a pretty comprehensive list of resources that Shirley's going to be sending out. Do you want me to do questions at lunch? Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's very similar. It's, they call theirs mindfulness-based stress management as opposed to stress reduction. If you call it MBSR, you follow John Kabat-Zinn's outline, and they deviate a little bit, but it's a lot. That's actually where I first took my first course. Yeah, it's very similar. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I used to run cardiac and pulmonary rehabs, and I used to tell my patients that arguing with your sneakers is the hardest part of the habit. So I would say whatever you do, whatever you can do to get into the habit of doing it, and then build from there. Dan Harris, who wrote 10% Happier, has you start with 2 minutes a day. If you went into an 8-week mindfulness-based stress management program, they would ask you to do 30 minutes a day to see, to really establish the habit and get the brain so that it's used to the practices. There's been no definitive research on exactly what works, but it's really the habit, and I find with people that doing it, the habit grows itself because there's so many benefits to it. Yeah.
And is it 30 minutes a day all at once?
You know what? Like I said, whatever you do to start, don't get hung up on the number. Think in terms of establishing a lifetime habit. And whatever works for you, like some people might do 10 minutes twice a day. Listen, start brushing your teeth and bringing your attention back to your toothbrushing. Or when you're walking outside, noticing is your mind like in the future or the past, and maybe you want to choose to have it in the moment and see what's around you. All of those things strengthen attention. And they all sort of add to the same benefit. Yeah, yeah. But the biggest bang for your buck is daily practice, whatever you can pull off, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the mindfulness program?
Yeah, sure. It meets for 8 weeks, and it goes 2.5 hours. They have both online and in person, and it's part education, it's part practice. You're given homework each week that helps support. But I think the most important thing doing it in a group is you get to hear like, I'm not crazy. I had that same experience, or my mind was running all over the place, or I really didn't want to sit down to practice this day, and you hear other people's experiences, and when you're establishing a habit like this, it's so helpful to have the support of other people. And I have to tell you, every class is different because every group of people are different. It's all wonderful. It's like one of my favorite things in the world to do. But, and it takes you through it takes you through working with emotion, working with thoughts, working with body sensations. At the same time, you're rewiring your brain. Yeah. Sure. Anyone else? All right, well, it's been such a pleasure. I said to Shirley, these are my people, It's so nice to get to, oh, you're so welcome.
Bonnie's my friend, too.
Absolutely. All right.
So, anyway, I hope you all learned something this morning.